or you
I
online
can give
or
it to Donnie, Natalie, and Mary Soul.
okay.
Donnie's
So-
gotta go to his listing.
Yeah, well, what I'm saying is I should know anybody's online if we wanna, is that on?
Just recording.
Okay, no
Yeah.
problem, okay. I just didn't know if anybody was like live watching, okay. So, what I wanna talk about today is, two things. I wanna talk about planning our days, and we're gonna use this to talk about that, and then I wanna talk about, the number one reason why people are successful universally is because they have a compelling reason to be successful. They have a compelling reason as to why they're doing what they're doing. And without a clarity of a compelling reason, you will never step into the moments that are uncomfortable for you, that stand between you and the success you want, are the moments that are uncomfortable. So until we can let go of what we're afraid of, our past, or who we are right now in the present moment, until we can let go of that fear and step into the moments that are uncomfortable, what we desire or what we hope to achieve in 5 or 3 or 10 years is not possible until we can step into those moments. And the only thing that makes you able to step into those moments is a clear vision of what you are going to become, because you won't do certain things ever because they're too scary without the vision of who you're going to become. So there's a quote, and I'm going to read it. It says, "When you are more true to your future self than your past self." So when you think about this, so why this moment is scary is because you're being true to who? What self? Your past self. That's why it's scary. When you are more true to your future self than your past self, your future becomes more present than your past. You guys get this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that, I love how he says this. So who you're going to become is what you're really focused on instead of who you were.
Right.
So this moment isn't scary because you're thinking about you're normally shy and you're not a good salesperson. The moment is exciting because you're like, I want to be outgoing and I want to be a good salesperson. This moment is exciting because it's going to teach it. It's going to teach me how to do it. Does that make sense? So that hard moment is showing up because it couldn't have noticed that hard moment hasn't shown up in your past. And why? Because your past self didn't see your future self doing shit like this. So you're not in the moment. You never were. But today, because you have a vision of who you're going to become, you created this moment, and it's hard because you want to be that person on the other side of this experience. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So again, I'm gonna start over and read this again. When you're more true to your future self than your past self, your future becomes more present than your past. Then, through the many thousands of shifts in focus and action that you will take, it's only a matter of time before your future becomes your present. So you can't experience this hard moment 100 times without becoming that person, unless you choose just to be a moron in that moment and just not really do anything.
Yeah.
And just go, why does this always happen to me?
It's not gaining anything.
Yeah. Why do people always whatever? Right?
Slam the door in my face.
Say it again.
Slam the door in my
Yeah,
face.
slam the door in my face. I guess. Well, forget it. I guess I'll never be that person. Well, that person is on the other side of 2,000 doors being slammed in your face. That's where that person exists in the future. Does that make sense? So your ego always wants to make things harder than what they are. Always. because the ego is always trying to be comfortable. And there's no growth in the comfort zone, and there's no comfort in the growth zone. And so your ego has a great capacity to make that which is simple complex. And complexity is the killer of execution. Complexity kills execution. The more complex you make something, it's not going to happen.
You said complexity kills
Execution.
That's what it was.
And execution gets you results. Whether it's good or bad, execution gets you results. So I want you to think of the word, when I say reiterate, if I say, I'm going to reiterate that, what does reiterate mean?
Means you're gonna say it again.
Go over it again in your mind, or
Okay. I'm going to go over it again. So what is iterate? I'm going to iterate something to you.
Does it mean say it?
It means
Explain it?
break it down, maybe?
So I want you to think about this. This just happened to me a couple weeks ago. So if I say iteration, this is the iteration. Today is an iteration of your goals. Today is an iteration of your goals. What is today? What is that? What is the iteration?
It's happening now.
Okay? Happening now?
So when you reiterate, you just go over what's happening.
Where's the blank? Oh, I'm gonna draw on this. Is that okay? This is easy,
Yeah.
right?
Here's some markers.
Okay. So I want to show you something.
It's cool.
So it's like going deep in my brain.
Can I erase this?
Yeah, go for
What's
it.
going deep in your brain?
I'm just thinking about like the things we're doing now are creating our future results.
Yeah.
Like I'm just picturing that it's headed that way.
Yeah. So I'm going to read the definition because I looked it up and I looked up a couple different definitions, but I found this one that was really just explained it. So, iteration is the repetition of a process in order to generate an outcome. So I want you to write this down. Iteration is the repetition of a process in order to generate an outcome.
So iteration is repetition, so reiterate is to repeat
The process.
again.
So again, iteration is the repetition of a process in order to generate an outcome. There's more to this definition, but I want you to get that all down.
Repetition of a process.
In order to generate an outcome. So, iteration, so let's just say this. Iteration equals repetition. So under that, just write iteration equals repetition equals process equals outcome. Iteration equals repetition equals process equals outcome. Make sense? Okay, so here we go. You got it?
Iteration equals repetition equals process equals outcome.
Yep. Now, so here's the next part to the definition. The sequence will approach some endpoint or end value. So here we go. So this is the iteration one. Let's just say this is one. This is iteration 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And each iteration delivered some type of outcome. Iteration the repetition of a process to deliver an outcome, right? The sequence will at some point, at some end point, and the sequence will approach some end point or end value. So these iterations, and so what I want you to imagine is these little squares make this square. Let's just say I took all these little squares and they make that square. Okay? Each repetition of the process is a single iteration, and the outcome of each iteration is then the starting point of the next iteration. So this is the starting point of this one. This is the starting point of this one. So today you made calls, okay? You didn't get anybody. You didn't make any contacts where someone says, yeah, I want to work with you. Nobody. Iteration 1. But what happened today was, see, you thought today's calls were about getting a client. It's not. It's an iteration of becoming the person who can get the client. Today is not to get the client. You'll always be disappointed if today's to get the client. But when you can focus on the process of today is about becoming the person to get the client, you will get the client. Because you will enjoy the process. And it's only when you enjoy the process does the real outcome happen.
So if you don't enjoy it, nothing will happen.
It's not going to happen. Well, not that it won't, but it's going to take longer to happen. You're extending it. Because at some point, I mean, you're going to find somebody. You make 1,000 calls, and even if you're terrible, you're going to get somebody. But wouldn't you rather, instead of 1 to 1,000, make it 40 to 1,000 or something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but it's an iteration. So your life, so every day of your life is what? It's an iteration. Because today you're picking up where you left off yesterday of who you're becoming. See, and if you don't have a clear vision and a compelling reason of who that is, then what you iterate today is the person of the past and not the person of the future. Do you get this? And you just become more and more stuck. You become more and more resentful. You become more and more unhappy and discontent.
Like the person that always thinks he's getting bills in the mail.
That's right. That's right. Because their life is an iteration of the person in the past. It's a Groundhog Day kind of thing, right? The Bill Murray Groundhog Day, we're just like, same crap is happening. Groundhog Day is a perfect example of an iteration. It just over and over and over. And he picked up where he left off. He picked up where he left off, where he learned. It was the same time. Sorry. It's the same time, right? And that time it was the same day, but it was, does that make sense? So you have to look at, if you don't have a compelling reason, then what do you now know based upon the definition, iteration? If you don't have a compelling reason or a clear vision of your future and what you're going to become and do, what are you doing every day?
You're going to be stuck as the person as you were yesterday.
That's right.
No improvement.
You're not climbing, you're just
That's right.
Or backsliding.
It's like not moving in any specific direction.
That's right.
Hovering.
100%. So here's the thing. So how do you know that you're not hovering? First clue. If you're seeking to be comfortable every day, you're iterating the past. Because the past is comfortable. The future is always exciting or uncomfortable. The past is depressing. What depression is the focus of the past. It's an overwhelming, compelling, persistent thought of the past, and it can't change. that is depression. It's a psychological issue. It's a psychological condition to where your mind is repeating the past and it can't imagine it ever changing. That's depression.
I've always thought of depression as it's almost like your brain telling you you need to grow, you need to make a change. So if you're depressed, you're probably stuck
That's right.
and you need to overcome something.
That's 100%. It breaks you till you stop, until you break the cycle of saying, I'm going to stay comfortable. Makes sense? And I say that from experience because I've gone through it. And so it was a persistent thought, if I can't change my future, and my future is just going to equal my past, right? Your future is not equal to your past. That's why you think what that really means. The person you were and what you experienced, the crappy things that you experienced and the crappy things that you did in your past does not equal your future. Your future, you get to choose and change your destiny. Your past, you can't change what you experienced. You can change how you experience life. You can determine what it is you want to iterate. So I just want you to write this question down. What do I want to iterate? What process? So what do I want to iterate in my life? What do I want to iterate in my life? So I can't tell you how many times that, even recently, the other day I woke up going to work and I just thought, what am I doing today? What am I doing? I don't even know what I'm doing today. I mean, I know it's on my calendar, but I don't even know what I'm really driving at. It doesn't even make a difference. Like, what am I doing? And I find myself every now and again, it seems like every couple months, I wake up and I have a day or two or three where I'm just like, what am I doing? What am I doing today? What's happening? And I'm just kind of, I got these things and I'll just go home. Right? You guys ever feel like that?
Mm-hmm.
I know, especially in the beginning of this business, it's just like, oh, I gotta do this again today. When do I ever get to do the fun stuff? And like, problem is, this is how it always feels. Like, it's always just taking you outside of your comfort zone. Right? So I want you to write this down. When I'm comfortable, I'm not growing. Or when I'm comfortable, I'm not becoming who I want to become. When I'm comfortable, I'm not becoming who I want to become. I want you to write this down. The more uncomfortable moments that I experience in a day equals becoming who I want to become. The more uncomfortable experiences or moments I have in a day equals I am becoming who I want to become. And it's why we all will say, when we have experienced something really hard in our lives, we will say, dude, I would never go back and do that again. But I wouldn't take it away either. But man, I just don't know if I could go back and do that again, but I'm glad I had the experience
You grew from it.
Mm-hmm.
because you actually grew from it and it was a forced growing.
Yeah, even if it's horrible, you can still find something you learned from it.
That's right. So I recently made a Facebook post and I said this, I titled it this, I hated the real estate industry because it changed who I was. I hated it. And I remember I got in this business and I hated it because it just seemed like every day it just showed me that I wasn't enough. I wasn't enough. I was uncomfortable. Oh, I gotta make this call. My stomach is sick. I'm like, I gotta call him. The deal's not gonna fund. We gotta re-sign all the docs.
Too much stress.
I'm like, I do not want to make this phone call. I hated it. I'd come home and tell my wife, like, I gotta get out of this job. I hate it. But after a while, I realized, after about, I remember thinking, after a year, thinking, oh my gosh, like, I am not the person I was a year ago. Like, I have changed significantly. And I noticed that because Viv said to me, you are not the man I married. Like, the man I was married to a year ago, he does not exist anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Who are you?
And what'd you do with my husband?
Yeah, she would say, where's the little boy I married? I'm like, he died because he got so scared. He had to die. I'm like, he died and burned like the phoenix and then rose again, But this business is so demanding and in your face and compelling. If you don't have a compelling reason, you will walk out of it. It will kick you out and wash you out faster than you can imagine. And the second the market shifts, people flee this industry like rats on a sinking
Mhm.
ship. They're like, I was only in here because it was easy.
Yeah, last year I think we were at 16,000 agents. Now we're down to like 9,000.
Is it really that many?
Yeah,
Oh,
a
wow.
lot of people dropped off.
Wow.
Yeah, I remember. I remember when I got in this business in 03 and when the market shifted in end of 07 and 08, I was shocked. The people that I thought were these agents and these loan officers who I thought were big deals in this, in this industry, they were taking jobs at Home Depot, and I'm like, you take a job at Hobby Lobby? Like, what? How am I still in this business?
Mhm.
It just scared the crap out of them. And what they knew was what? They weren't willing to be uncomfortable. This year is a skill building year. If you stay in the business this year,
You're gonna learn a ton.
you're gonna learn a ton. If you just finish it out. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So I want to tell you the advice that I got in this business. In my first job, I got a job as an escrow officer. I'd never had any experience. They said they'd train me off the street. They said I literally didn't even know what a deed of trust was. And they said, do you have a mortgage? I said, yeah. They said, well, you signed one of these. I'm like, I don't remember it. Okay, if I signed one. Anyway, one day, a couple months into this job, I remember feeling sick, like I would get sick every Sunday night. And I'm just like, something is wrong with me. Like, I get sick every Sunday night.
Because you don't want to go to work on
I
Monday.
didn't realize is that I hated work was so. The place I worked at, the environment was really terrible. It was awful, honestly. It was very toxic, just pointing fingers and it's his fault, her fault, you did. I'm like, I'm not gonna be I did it, but I don't know anything. I'm new, Anyway, I was sick, and I was so sick. One night I just thought, my stomach was just churning. Back then we didn't call it anxiety. We just said scared. I'm just saying you're scared. So my dad was in the military for 18 years, was a drill sergeant, and not only that, but honestly, my dad was born in 1931, so it was like most of your almost great grandparents. My mom is 91 this year.
Your mom?
My mom is 91 this year. So that's like your great grandma.
Well,
So
my mom's 87.
So what I'm saying is, I was raised, I always say this to my wife, I'm like, I always say this to my wife, your dad's mindset is my mindset. I'm your dad's generation, because I was raised my mom can be your dad's mom, right? Her dad is 70, my mom is 91.
So she was around during the Depression.
Yeah, and she remembers, my dad remembers his mom not eating at the dinner table saying, how come you guys aren't eating with us? And my grandma told this to me, how she goes, we only had so much food. They lived on a farm, and she's like, we would give the food, and then we would just watch the kids, and whatever the kids didn't eat, I would eat. Wow. So, anyway, my point is that my dad was very like, he didn't care if it was scary. He didn't care if it was hard. He didn't care if your arm was broke, you did it, you know? And I'll never forget when I was a kid, we were taking a cow from my granddad's farm to the slaughterhouse, you know? And so they backed the trailer up, but for some reason the trailer couldn't go into like the barn door or whatever it was. So there was this gap. I'm 10 years old. And I'm a really skinny kid at 10. Like, I'm 10 years old and my dad says, stand right here. And I was to man the gap between like here
In the back of the truck.
and the back of the trailer, like, which was like probably about here. And he goes, and if that bull comes this way, you just yell at the bull and it'll go right up. I'm like, are you kidding me?
You're gonna get knocked over.
I'm like, Dad, I can't do that. He goes, do it. I'm like, oh, I cannot do it. And he's like, GD it. I don't want to hear another word. You stand there and you just yell at that bull. I'm like, I'm more scared of him than this 2,500 bull. I'm like, okay. You know? Anyway, and then my cousin, who was like 6 years older than me, was on the opposite side. Anyway, the bull comes and it like looks at me and I'm just like, my voice cracked. I was like, yeah, you know, I was just like, whatever. I just jump up and down. And it looked at me and went, and sure enough, like it turned away. And the cousin who's 16 and he was big. He was like big for a 16-year-old. He gets scared and jumps out of the way, and the bull jumps and gets stuck on the fence. And my dad's cussing my cousin out. I was like, I did my job. I did my job. Anyway, my point of saying this is that my dad just didn't. There was nothing scary or hard. You just did it. And it might be scary and hard, but you're going to do it, you know? So here I am getting sick to my stomach every Sunday night. And I just had this feeling, and I didn't have like a great relationship with my dad. And I never told him my problems just because he's like, well, just fix it. Bye. You know?
Don't be a candy ass.
Yeah. So I'll never forget, I had this thought, like I had a kid at home. I was on welfare, honestly, Ron Wick, and I'm like, I just want to quit this job. How can I quit a job when I'm already on Wick, already on welfare? I'm making $30,000 a year. I got 2 kids at home. Like, this is crazy. And so I called my dad and I told him what I was experiencing. I said, I am sick to my stomach every night. And he said this to me. He's like, can you do the job if you were to quit today? Can you do the job somewhere else? Could you go? He goes, sounds like, he was like, I was actually surprised that he was compassionate, honestly, because I was just like, he's just not like this, you know? And he goes, sounds like you're working at a terrible place. Do you think it's a good job? I'm like, yeah, it's a good job. He goes, great. You're at a terrible place, but it's a good career if you're at the right place. I go, yeah, potentially. You know, my friend was owned a title company. Anyway, I said, yeah, it totally is. And he goes, can you do the job? If you quit today, could you go and do the job somewhere else? And I said, no. And he says, great, this is a gift. Learn the job, and as soon as you learn the job and you know you can quit and go do it somewhere else, quit. But don't quit until you've learned it, and you can go do it somewhere else. Make sense? Mm-hmm. I hated it. When he said it, I was like, that means I have to go in tomorrow. I can't quit. I was like, I hate this job. And so I think about that advice and about the thought of making that one phone call, because honestly, I was quitting. Because Viv goes, just quit. It's a terrible place. Just quit. I hate living with you when you do this. When you go to work, I hate it. So I think of that phone call back in 2003. What was that? 18 years ago. And if I would have quit the job and gone to another industry, if I would have quit the job, I wouldn't have stayed in it. I wouldn't be here. Wouldn't be talking to you. And I wouldn't have become the person I am today, who I love, who I am. And I know that there's not another job that I would have chosen, because I wasn't brave enough to choose it. I wasn't brave enough to choose to be in this industry. But I was compelled to be in this industry, and I'm glad who it made me become, to stay in it. So if you by staying in this industry, by staying in a hard job, and being, and knowing, staying in a hard job and knowing that you have the energy in you to fight for your survival, because I knew I wasn't gonna not pay my bills. I'm not the person that's just gonna quit and just, well, I can't get a job. I'm gonna keep the job even though I hate it. I will keep it. It pays the bills. Most of them anyway. Like, it paid the bills, and I wasn't gonna quit. And I was going to survive in it. And what I realized is that by working and being uncomfortable every day, I was becoming that person faster than I ever would have chosen to become that person. That makes sense?
Mhm.
And so if you look at what's hard for you today in this business, what's hard? What's the hardest thing about your job every day? What you do. When you get in here, what's the hardest thing you do?
Start making calls.
Start making calls.
Get started, yeah.
Yeah, getting started, right? That's the hardest thing you do. You guys agree with that? It's hard. I hated it, honestly. So when you can look at that moment of saying, by getting started and making these calls, I'm honoring my future self more than, and I don't want to honor my past self or my past stories. Like, this job gives you an opportunity to literally become who you want to become. And when you can see it as, this is hard, but this is who I'm gonna become in the end. This is how I'm gonna become in the end. When you can see it as that, as opposed to, I have to make these calls, or I have to make my 10 calls, or how many ever calls you make every day, I have to make my 30 calls, or whatever it is. But you can see it as you're honoring your future self and becoming that person. There's no question in my mind that if you make 10,000 calls, that this job doesn't get a whole hell of a lot easier.
Mhm.
You just gotta make your 10,000 calls, or your 5,000 calls, whatever it is. After 5,000, it gets a lot easier. And the more you make, it just gets easier and easier and easier. And there's always going